what are you up to the evening of October 5th? It's more specifically at 7:30. Now that's a Saturday. So if you don't have any plans and you'd like something fun and interesting to do, maybe that you've never done before, why not come to a live podcast with me and Patrick Beach? If you're in the yoga world, you probably know who Patrick Beach is. And if you don't, well, put it this way. He's kind of a big deal, as Ron Burgundy would say. He's the handstand OG. Since I last spoke to him, he's become a daddy. He's become a studio owner. So there's tons to catch up on. It's a live event with a little audience. It's only 10 quid as well, 10 euros to come. And if you'd like to come, bring a friend with you as well. Feel free to visit my website, kevinboyyoga.ie. And if you go to events and retreats, you'll be able to find more information and purchase your ticket there. While you're there, if December 14th, the calendar looks a bit empty for you, or you fancy heading outside of Dublin, come to my handstand workshop. That is in Sligo, December 14th at 1 p.m. in Salt and Soul. 30 quid to come along to learn how to handstand, the fundamentals, so that you can approach a handstand practice with a bit more confidence and hopefully integrate it into your own practice. Again, all information can be found on my website. If you'd like to book directly with Salt and Soul, you go to their website and that's where you can book your spot. This podcast is brought to you by The Nature of Things, beautifully crafted essential oils. This year, I met with their founder, Benoit Nicole. He's based in the Chocolate Factory, and they've got a really cool setup there. Benoit has spent the last 20 years working with the finest oil producers and perfumers, and now he's got his own offering. Essential oils straight from nature. No nasties, no funny stuff, just pure oil. If you'd like to get yourself some oils, a diffuser, or maybe treat a friend to a gift set, visit thenatureofthings.ie, fill your basket and use the promo code YOGALIFE for 10% off all products. That offer is valid until October 31st and it's one use per customer only. The other people that help support this podcast are Small Changes, organic, eco-friendly whole food store based here in Dublin, Ireland. They believe in a zero waste ethos. So if you'd like to get yourself some organic produce or products for your house, then go to their store. They don't have an online offering yet. Walk in there. Feel free to tell them you heard about it from me and get yourself some organic stuff to look after the environment and look after yourself. That's all I have to say on the intro. This podcast is with Naomi Sturdy. Naomi's done so much. But I first met Naomi when we went to, it was last year, we went to a rewilding event. Went to the beach, practiced some meditation, some animal movement, did some breathing. And ever since then, I've followed her closely on, not literally, I haven't stalked her. I've been following her online. And what's really inspiring about Naomi is that she was actual school teacher and now she's moved purely into the yoga teaching world. She set up her own teaching academy called The Art of Teaching, and she's a podcaster. So she's in two areas that I'm massively interested in: teacher training and podcasting. So without further ado, here is Naomi. Hey, Naomi.
Hello.
It's a good way to start.
I'll just leave it at that. Hi.
Yeah. How are you?
I'm okay. Yeah, I'm good.
Thank you for the book.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. The acclaimed guide to stress-related diseases and coping. This is a kind gift that Naomi gave me. So by Robert Sapolsky?
Yeah. That's it.
And what's his TED Talk?
So it's basically his whole, I guess, research goes into, like the name of the book is Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. So it's like, what's the human condition that's creating like say disease or ill health because of stress. Like, why are animals not getting stress related diseases? So it's kind of looking into what is the specific human element that's causing that. And it's very interesting. So yeah, and I've heard you refer a few times to, like, you know, sort of the modern facets of our living, like using our phones or, you know, our busy lifestyles or whatever. And I guess when we're yoga teachers, it's kind of, you know, I think we can kind of focus on, yes, there is like modern things that lead to us being specifically stressed now, but there's also very universal human elements. That's not just because of like, oh, it's all social media's fault, for example. Like, so yeah, that's just very interesting.
What would you say? Because I'm going to read it, and you know, I'm actually. This is reading. This is something I want to talk about because when I was younger, I've never told anyone this publicly. I haven't. So
First now,
just between me and you, but I don't think I have. Anyway, when I was growing up, I was raised in a very like Catholic community, and my teacher at the time, she taught us from the age of 6 to 10. Even before that, actually, it could have been infants maybe. But I remember reading like Billy Blue Hat and Roger Red Hat and stuff. These were books we had to help you to read. And she would chastise me, tell me off when I would get words wrong. And it really gave me a complex about reading in public. So I just didn't want to read then at all. And I just did terrible in school, particularly in English, because I had a complex about reading. And when we used to go around, you know, in class, I don't know if they still do it, but back in the day, they would have everyone reads a paragraph each. And you know it's coming to you. You're like, right, which paragraph is going to be me? And you try and get to that paragraph. And I used to dread that. But I was confident speaking in front of people, but not reading ever. Even I had family members getting married at christenings and they'd asked me to do a prayer up at the church and I couldn't do it. I'd refuse. And so I had this complex. But recently I was given a book by Dan Morgan. Dan was a guest on the podcast a few weeks ago. And it's a book about sleep. And I know it sounds daft, but I'm like 37 and a half years old. And now at nighttime, I'll read a chapter to my girlfriend aloud. And what I've realized is even just after a few days, I'm so much better at reading aloud. It's just a confidence thing.
Yeah, definitely.
It's confidence.
Yeah.
And in the teacher training this weekend, I was reading aloud, and I'll read now aloud to people in Shavasana. I'll pick a prayer or a mantra and read it. And I'm not kidding you. Within a couple of weeks now, I'm a fairly confident reader. So that complex is just gone almost overnight.
Yeah.
Because I faced it, but
yeah, and it's like it's interesting that when you notice like I think that's another big part of yoga, like becoming aware of where something started. So you remember this. Oh yeah, it's because that teacher, you know, maybe used to say, oh, come on, Kevin, read faster, or whatever words she used. And then somewhere in you, like, buried that as, I'm bad at reading, or I don't enjoy this. This isn't a nice feeling, so I don't like reading out loud. And if we, in yoga, like when we sit and we're still and we're recollecting maybe why we feel a certain way or what's going on for us, then when you have that awareness, you can go, yeah, it's because that teacher said that to me. Now you've the opportunity to go, actually, that's not true anymore. I want to read out loud and I think I can do this. And then, like you say, you start to get the confidence because you're like, oh yeah, that was just a thing that was said to me years ago. But I think what can happen for some people is, without the awareness part, they, for years and years and years, go around, and it could be anything in our lives, and we just don't realize what we don't know, or we don't realize why we're afraid of something, or we don't realize why we avoid something or kind of push it to the side. So yeah.
and I think it's an interesting point that when you discover the root, then you can start to address it. But also, I discovered the root, but I don't blame her, because this woman, I won't say her name, she lived on my road. And she was our teacher for all grown up. And also she was, when you go to mass and the people that give out the wine and the bread, what are they called?
Oh, I don't know.
They're like three older people be on the altar giving out the bread and the wine. She was one of them.
Okay, yeah.
So she was legit in the church. So I would come home to our mum and be like, "Oh, mum, Mrs. X, whatever, like told me off today or hit me or whatever." She used to hit us with a meat stick in the hand and stuff. And my mum would be like, "What did you do?" I said, "When I was messing around." She goes, "Well, you deserved it, Ever." So I don't, because that's all she knew growing up. This teacher, she was old school.
Yeah.
So I don't blame her. And I think sometimes, Naomi, like, you're right about the root can help solve things, but only if you don't treat yourself like a victim. And I thought to myself, I don't blame her. What I did instead was I internalized it and said, I'm not a good reader, therefore I'm thick.
Yeah.
But I'm funny and people like me, so that's going to be my thing. So I thought, I'm not going to be the academic at all. I'm going to shun homework and instead see like how much I can get on with people. Yeah. And it's weird. You become, but I mean, I think that's the way it was when I was in school. It was like, to be clever wasn't cool.
Yeah.
Is that still the same?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I like being a nerd, so. But like what you were saying there of like, where you discover the root and then there's a feeling of not now present you at your age is not the victim. But I think there's an important step just before that is you were a victim to a situation. And that doesn't mean you have to blame that teacher, but you can say, oh, I was victim to maybe some chastising or some, embarrassing humiliation in my classroom or whatever. I was victim to it, but I'm no longer like a victim of it. So now you're in the present again. Now you're like, oh yeah, like I was hurt in that situation, or I was sort of embarrassed. But now I, like you said, I understand that teacher, that might have happened to her. And then that's all she knows how to teach. Yeah. So, your adult mind can recognize that and like almost forgive. But now you get to have the building blocks to go forwards to go, yeah, I'd like to further, build my confidence at reading or whatever it is. So you're no longer a victim. So I think that's the like important little step as well. But
isn't it amazing how long these things can stay with you?
Yeah. Oh my God. Well, I'm sure I still have a million things. So.
Because you're a teacher, you're an actual proper, not a proper teacher, you're a school teacher.
Well,
right?
I was qualified school teacher. I did that for 7 years and now I'm full-time yoga and bits and pieces of Pilates. So yeah.
But you're still doing the school teaching?
No.
Oh.
So yeah, it's all full time.
When did that end?
2012.
Okay, so, you're for 2 months on your holidays.
I did, yeah.
Okay.
I'm trying to go back to that lifestyle.
You're still having school holidays.
It's like, that's an ingrained thing. I'm like, I don't want to work during the summer.
So what is interesting now? We talk about like school and a teacher and how things are delivered and how things are reinforced.
Yeah.
And now, because we were just talking about this a moment ago, the weekend just gone was my first experience leading a teacher training. And what I realized was that, first thing I realized is that I thought, oh, I'm going to do this. This is it now. I've found something that I'm going to do way more of this, 100%. So that was good. But the other thing I realized was people were so engaged, and it surprised me how engaged they were. When I'm speaking, people are like taking notes, looking, and I'm thinking, oh, I know more than I thought I did. I kind of doubted myself. But because they're so engaged, that's good. But not downside, but the thing you have to be aware of is that people are very emotionally invested in this. And I started to realize how everything I'm saying is really important.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
How I frame things is really important. And it's a very sensitive environment. Especially because you're there all day, and when people get tired, we can get emotional, and things become amplified. So I'm real conscious now of my communications. And this is what I wanted to ask you about. When did because you have the art of teaching.
Yeah.
Right. So, but when was your first experience being a teacher trainer?
2016 was the first one.
And was it with the art of teaching? Or was it with
Yes, yeah.
So is that you and Sybil's thing? That's your...
Yeah, we created it. We got together in 2015 and wrote the curriculum, planned everything out. And then the first one was 2016. So, yeah.
Is that, and that's in a studio at My Body? Or?
The last one this year, 2019, was in My Yoga Body in Dunleary.
Yoga Body. And that's right next to the sea, isn't it?
It is, yeah. That was a real bonus.
I'm always I'm so envious of the...
It was amazing. I think I got into the sea every single day of the training, so it was fab. It was really, it's cool.
And so when does the next one start?
There will be one in 2020 and it should be springtime. Yeah.
And is it still in My Yoga Body?
There's a little bit of a change now. Sibylla's traveling and doing amazing things. So there'll be a few little changes in the works, and then hopefully 2020. So
And when you wrote the curriculum, were you had you taught on other teacher trainings before?
I did some sort of experiences with where I initially had done my teacher training, but no, this was the first full on teacher training. So
What was that like when you first, do you remember the first weekend sitting down with the curriculum, students around you, and then that starting? What was that like?
So what was it like? I suppose coming from the school teaching background, having that idea of teaching content wasn't as alien to me. It was more familiar to have okay, this is our beginning, this is where we want to be working towards, so that idea of aims, objectives, what the students were coming in with, that kind of thing. So it was a little more familiar for me from a school teaching background. I guess tied with that, because it was yoga and there's maybe the weight of wanting to, live up to people's expectations or how much value yoga can give. That was a little bit I hope I do this a service. That was a little bit more of a feeling of responsibility maybe. So
What interests me is how, it's not the information itself, but how it's delivered, because... Because let's say, for example, you could do, here's the manual, we're going to read a paragraph each and go through this. And that's one way of doing it. Getting people to public speak. Everyone is like you're in school. That bit's coming to you. So you want to focus.
Yeah.
And you're going through the curriculum. There's that, for example, one way of delivering. Another way could be you take the manual itself, that same section, that module, and you put it into slides.
Yeah.
The benefit of that is, there's a visual element there where you can use pictures, imagery, video even. And you can then open discussion amongst the slides. But the downside of that is it's very passive. People might not be that engaged. People's minds start to drift. So I'm really fascinated with how is the best way to deliver information.
Yeah.
And also there's group exercises, there's partner work, and knowing when is the right time to do that. And to be honest, I'm at the stage now where I'm figuring that out. I mean, I think I know what works, but I'm interested to see what your thoughts are.
I think every group is different. Say with the Art of Teaching, I've had 4 completely different groups, and it was the same when I was a school teacher. You might write a lesson plan for, say I was doing a geography lesson, and with one group they loved it and they loved the games and they're like, oh my god, this is amazing, and then another group they're like, this is so boring, why are we doing this? So it's the dynamic of the group as well. So I think and I'm still always learning. Each year I'll ask, what do you feel worked? What didn't work? What would you like to see more of? And what was great over the years is hearing back things that I never would have even thought of. So where someone might say, some of the handouts, the font was different on one handout than another, and that was very distracting. That's something that I'm whoa, I wouldn't have even thought of that. But then obviously that's important to someone who's, very into maybe how things are displayed and how they look, and that helps them learn. So it's just so interesting. And I think one thing I try to stick to as a teacher is, like you say, you might be a very visual person. So you're like, oh, I love the part when they show us the slides, or when I'm able to read it or hold it in my hand and see it. But then the other person in the room could be I love when we're doing the pair work and I get to actually chat about it and kind of figure out, what is it that I think about this? So as a teacher, I try to make sure I do a bit of visual, a bit of like internalization, a bit of interaction, a bit of whatever, all throughout the day. So each person there gets to feel satisfied, that they maybe got catered to, that it's not just, oh my God, today was all just staring at a screen, or, that kind of way.
That's really good.
So yeah, that's one thing I like to do. So at least then you feel, okay, guys, I know some of you don't like this internalization bit, but then, later we're doing the chatting or whatever. So yeah.
Yeah, so true. But also, and that is a great strategy, and also to be mindful of the energy of the room, because what I've noticed as well is that, speaking in a yoga mindset, what you do with your body affects your mind, and vice versa. And after lunch, I started to realize that people were getting quite tired, and they were sitting on the floor, and that you can tell they're a bit uncomfortable, didn't know how to sit, and because that's when you first sit, it's actually quite hard to sit on the floor all day if you're not used to it.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I remember my teacher, and it was, so what I did was I did like a little 20-minute workshop after lunch, and it was essentially like salsa dancing. It was basically like this. It was Tai Chi CrossFit salsa dancing, or what they call push hands.
Oh yeah,
you put in push hands. Yeah. And I put on some salsa music and stuff, and people were laughing, and then we had a little competition of push hands and like a knockout competition. And then from there, I went into we had what we call the Asana lab, so breaking down poses, but it tied into getting back into their body, but not just after lunch, stand everyone in Tadasana. I thought people are going to be like, God, how long are we standing here for? But I got the energy up, and I thought that worked really well. So as you said, people are different learners. So you have to cater for everyone, but also to understand what is, when to bring the energy up, when to take it down. And I realized towards the end, what I did was I did a long meditation, and then I have this meditation I do about gratitude that always gets people emotional. And I did it because I was thinking, like, I know people are going to cry when I do this, because I usually do get a few tears. But I think it's important to make people feel something. So they laughed during the day. 2 hours later, some of them cried, but cried not cried like, damn it, cry, but cry like to.
Before you leave, you must cry.
But because I think it's so important that it's an experience where they actually feel stuff, joy, sadness, whatever it may be, but it's not. And I do think that's.
Well, I guess I think what you're trying to say, or maybe what I'm sensing, is that when we're in our everyday lives, I feel like often what can happen is we're maybe in our cognition quite a lot, or we're completing tasks, or we're doing our emails or whatever. And I guess what you're hitting at is that in this experience, we have the opportunity to actually feel. So we're not numbed out. We're not just sitting there going like, all right, okay, what time is it? Is it nearly over? We're actually like, whoa, I do feel gratitude, like, or I do feel happy doing this dance, or, that you're actually living. You're not, kind of zombieing around during your day. And I think maybe that's what you were getting at. And I do think that's quite important. Like, I would feel the same as a teacher, or even in my own activities, like that, tapping into that sense of experiencing whatever it is. So if it's joy, if it's sadness, if it's, like frustration, that this is what it is. Like, it's not, oh, I'm just going to think about it for 10 hours. It's, I'm feeling what it is.
Yeah.
It might be fire in my belly, or it might be tightness in my throat, or sweating, or whatever, but I'm aware of it. I'm feeling it. Like,
do you know what? But then I think that makes it a much more worthwhile environment, because when people feel something, there's a bit of emotion in the room, it makes a big difference. I think people learn quicker. Like
Yes.
Like say for example, you're talking about biomechanics. That's not going to stir the emotions too much, but it's stuff that has to be covered. But then if you're talking about the yamas and niyamas, you start talking about something like ahimsa, veganism comes up. And I said yesterday, you know, sometimes it's important that we challenge each other. You know, we don't agree with each other. And I realized that when these topics came up, people perked up more. They were leaning forward as opposed to like learning about, you know, the skeletal system.
Yeah.
But then some people are like that. So what would you? Because I'm basically trying to pick your brains. Shame. But no, because I'd say to people who listen to this, who are yoga teachers, I told myself for ages that I couldn't do the yoga teacher training. I was like, who am I to like teach people how to teach yoga, train people how to teach yoga? And when it was suggested to me, I kind of didn't really, it seemed surreal. And over the months and months and months leading up to this weekend that just happened, I was talking myself out of it. I don't know if you experienced this too, but like even the night before a workshop, I feel like cancelling it and being or just like, I'm not good enough here. And, but now I have that sense of relief that this is something that's really good, and other people who are teaching yoga could do it, but you won't know that you love it until you try it. So so I'm interested. Go on.
Like just to that, I think, you know, I've just come back from being away, as we were talking about. And one of the other things I do as well as yoga is rock climb. And like, it's really interesting because that comes up all the time. Like in rock climbing, everything goes kind of in numerical grading system upwards. So if you're like at a certain level, to go to the next number can just seem so intimidating. It's like, oh, I don't know, maybe tomorrow, like I'm not quite feeling, my arms feel tired, whatever. And it's exactly like you said, you can have all these excuses, maybe a little bit of like, oh God, those other people trying it look really fit and, you know, I'm not the same, whatever. Like all these kind of like feelings of imposter syndrome or whatever. But my trick is kind of like what you said, that like sometimes I have to just get on it. Like I don't have this positive language like you can do it or like you're amazing. I don't do any of that. I almost just go, just get on it. Just get on it. And then once I'm on it, I'm grand. Like I just do what I do and I go into that realm of, oh, now I'm doing it. Like now I try and I go into my muscle memory or whatever. And it's so interesting to me every time because like I've climbed for like 10 years and it never goes away. like something shows up when it's a new challenge for any of us. You know, whether it's a physical feeling or like a sense of resistance or whatever, you know, whenever it's a new area of, I heard the guy you were speaking to, Jerry Duffy, like a new area of growth is going to have some sense of like, I just want out of here. And my technique around that is like what you said, just kind of almost, well, I'll just try it and see what happens. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. That is a brilliant analogy, the climbing one.
Yeah.
It really is. It's so simple. I mean, again, take a workshop, for example. And so the night before, I just give myself reasons why I don't think it'll be good. Or what, and then as soon as it started, I'm like, just show up, do it, and then you're 20 minutes in, and that all goes away. I think maybe that's what they would refer to as like a flow state, perhaps. And it's interesting as well because I think, especially as a teacher, and it's something I reflect on a lot, that like there's this idea that a teacher or a leader is someone who just loves being in front of people and loves, you know, like being the show woman or the showman or whatever. And it's like, I feel internally there's nothing more false about that idea, that I don't want to be a show person or be a leader or stand out from the crowd. I just want to learn and help other people learn. So it's funny when you're nervous before a workshop or like a teacher training or whatever, that it's like,
to me, it's not tuning into like, oh, get up and show everyone this like amazing new thing or whatever. To me, it's tune into like the learning, like tune into that, like what's the thing we want to talk about in a very like almost like cave-like way. Like yeah, like, but as in like we're all in this little like learning cave. Like that's how I'd like to imagine it, rather than like I'm standing out and I'm gonna like perform for everyone, you know, that kind of way.
Because then you're framing it in a different way in your mind, and also you're thinking about how they're receiving the information as opposed to how do you sound.
Yes, you know? Exactly.
Like,
yeah,
and it's interesting to kind of to think of it like you're just sharing your knowledge, what you know, but then there is a fine line between that and making sure you do know, to not be like, because when people are there, people want to know that you're in control in a way, and it's doing that, it's being in control, saying I got this, I know what's happening next and what we're doing, but doing it with empathy, and being aware of how other people are feeling. But do you still do workshops?
I did a workshop just on Saturday gone with in Sinead Mooney's lovely place. In Blackrock. Oh. So yeah, I've been doing this year, that was the fourth one. They were yoga and mental well-being workshops. So it's sort of like marrying yoga with a sense of kind of approaching different themes around our mental well-being. So that's my kind of idea this year.
And do you do retreats as well?
I do, yeah. I teach, I taught retreats in Ireland and abroad. And now I mostly do retreats for a lady in Wicklow. She runs a place there. So yeah. And I go and teach.
What do you think of retreats?
I really enjoy them. I think the nice thing about retreats, or the different aspect, is kind of like, for me as the teacher, it comes from a place kind of like what I feel in climbing and what we were talking about, of like actually feeling, like actually experiencing something. I think it takes time for that to land in people, and in a retreat you get like maybe 2 days or like a day and a half or whatever it might be, to suddenly be transported out of your like, oh, I better check my phone, or I better go and get the kids, or do this for the dog or whatever. Like you're transported out of that to now, whoa, I actually am really tired, or I have been really busy. Like you get that space. So I think retreats give that a little bit more. So it's good. Yeah.
What do you find though to be the biggest challenge with retreats? As
being
the host,
I suppose it's similar to, say, the teacher trainings, in the way it's maintaining the energy or the trajectory of how something's going. Like if it's say the retreat starts on a Friday and it's say the Saturday evening, and you might have planned like, okay, we're going to do 2 strong classes or 2 strong sessions on the Saturday. Like then you get to Saturday evening and you're like, whoa, everyone's super tired, or it's hitting them that they're like need more rest. So it's kind of being aware of that as a teacher, to kind of go, like I chat to a few people there and I can sense, or I can see that's not going to happen. And you just have to maybe be aware to change what you were going to do. So,
It's because I experienced similar myself. 2 weekends ago, I did my first retreat or hosted my first retreat. And it was the exact same thing. I mean, it's just a simple thing. I could see people's arms were tired. Because I'd like to do a lot of arm stuff. And I realized quickly that I wanted to change it. And I think that's why it's quite important, before you do a retreat, you've taught for a little while first, you've got a few things in your toolbox. So for example, I did like a more of a playful workshop. Then I did some basic FRC, like cars, just controlled articular rotations, and that kind of stuff is quite relaxing, I mean, the hip stuff isn't sometimes, but to know that, and also and also to be aware that some people don't want to do everything. I was kind of like, right, at this time we do this, that, the other, and it's quite fixed, instead of saying this is all optional.
Yeah,
you can do basically whatever you want, but this is all options for you if you want to take them. And I think again, like a teacher training, people are more sensitive in that environment than they are in a public class. Yeah, because in a public class, it takes a while, as you said, to kind of drop into that new environment. But I realized, similar to the teacher training, I was like, this is the direction I want to go in. Because it's just so much more satisfying, don't you feel, to spend like a whole day with people or days with them, because you get to know people on a I mean, I felt like I was on the retreat.
Well, I think as well, like that's the aspect for a teacher. And like for me, like I'm quite introverted. Like I learn really slowly. I need to take time to go, what does that mean? And like then I'll process it. And you know, I really like this, like conversations where I'm focused and I'm involved. Like I'm not as happy with like the small talk or like, you know, short and snappy things. So I think if you're a teacher and you realize this is who I am and this is where I'm at my best, then like I've learned over the years, like the longer form stuff, you'll get a way better version of me than the shorter version stuff, because like I can still do a good job, but when I'm seeing people consistently over time, like I start being able to be like, oh yeah, like that happened yesterday, or, you know, let's see what could happen here. Like, it's like I get a better time as a teacher to process, here's where we can take this. Whereas when it's just an hour, you can still do stuff, but it's like, it's not as enriching to me as a teacher. And I think for some teachers, if you're maybe more extroverted and you just love kind of like chit chat and like in and out and that kind of thing, like that teacher might shine in that situation. But yeah, I've just learned it's not my like best.
It's so funny though, because when you use that word introvert, to some people it has a negative connotations, but to some, but and it's often not as black as white as I'm an extrovert or an introvert, because you can be almost an outgoing introvert, you know. As you said, if it's a long form context where you're with someone for a while, so in fact being an introvert is a huge asset, because often you'll listen more, as you know yourself, you listen more, and you give people space to express themselves. Because what I realized when I first started doing my teacher training, my 200 hour a few years ago, was people would say, I'm going to be a teacher because I got the gift of the gab. Or, I like to talk a lot. And it's like, just because you like to talk a lot doesn't mean you're a good communicator. It's so true. Because some people, I notice, they'll overpower the conversation. I hope I'm not one of them. but I'm aware. Where was I recently? I forget where I was, but I remember someone was just talking. I can't remember where I was, but I was there with them, and I was just noticing they were the only person talking, and that is not the same as being a good communicator. And but those immersive experiences is when it's good. I think it's good as a teacher, but also as a person. Actually, I found it, like, as I said, I felt like I was I was on the retreat. I was like, I should.
It's more nourishing for you as the teacher, because you're kind of like, you know, say we're based in Dublin and we might teach a class, and then it's like, oh, okay, I have to fly over to another place to teach another class, or you've got a private or whatever. You're kind of semi-thinking about that as well. Like, you have your own schedule to follow. Whereas when you're on the retreat as a teacher, like, that's the amazing thing. When you finish, say, the morning session, you're like, oh, we're sitting down for breakfast now.
I know.
Like, so it's so much more relaxing for you as the teacher as well, to kind of go, oh, actually, I've nowhere else to be. Like, I'm here with you guys. And even the bits in between, like, that's what I love on retreats. like the bits in between are so enriching, because you might sit down for breakfast beside someone and then you learn about their life. Like they say, oh, I'm from here and this and this and this, and this is why I came here. And then you're kind of like, oh, I'm going to tie that into the next, like you're just constantly getting more feedback for your teaching. Whereas when it's in the maybe studio setting or the city, once they're gone, once the class is over, that's it. Like you mightn't see that person again. So it's, you don't get any feedback of how they felt or
And funny enough, one of the people on my retreat, in public classes, they come to my public class a lot. They seem very quiet. On the retreat, they were like holding court. Cracking people up, like story after story. And I was thinking, wow, this is like...
It's lovely. Yeah, it's so nice.
Yeah, this is something, it's just how people are complicated and we have loads of different sides to us. And again, I find I'm terrible at small talk. You know, like the weather and stuff. I can't do it. I like to go like deep straight away, but some people are a bit... Actually, you know, small talk is a skill.
Yeah, it is. Cause I don't have it either.
When I used to work in the corporate environment, like in an office job, I used to go to meetings with this guy. He was a real slick guy from D4 and just like real good looking guy. And we used to go to meetings. He'd be like, Sandra, how are you? And like, mwah, mwah, you know. And he'd be like, oh, lovely weather we're having. When did you do this place up? And I'm sitting there thinking, I can't do this. I'm just waiting there to say something awkward, you know, awkward and direct to them. But I remember thinking, wow, this is, I can't schmooze. I'm not good at that.
But that's where, like, I think what you even said about, like, seeing the positive side of being an introvert, like even, you know, for a second in me is like going, yeah, like there is loads of positive sides. But it's like when we can see the who we are, when you bring awareness there and you can see the positive aspect, or you realize, you know, I need to get out of this job. It's a lot of small talk and, you know, it's distracting and I'm getting frustrated. You're serving yourself better by being a teacher, and all the people you now interact and be around and see and whatever, they're seeing a better you. So then they become a better them because they're inspired. And it's like that guy who you referred to who's good at it, he's in the best job ever because he loves it. Like he's like, you know, I love this, chit-chatting to people and whatever. And it's like, I think that, you know, for years when I was kind of changing from being a school teacher, I struggled with that a lot. Like, why? Like, I loved teaching, and it took me a long time to understand why am I not happy? And why I wasn't happy was there was a lot of stimulation in a school environment. Like, you might teach 9 classes a day, and then there's bells, and then there's, you know, academic goals that need to be met, and it was just constant. And my brain, like, I only realize now that my brain was just like, I'm fried. Like, I actually, my whole nervous system was taxed. I was like upset, angry all the time. And it's like, I didn't know then, but I know more now that I just wasn't in the right place for me to teach. Like, I'm in a better place now to meet people and be like, let me teach you now. Like, then I was not in the best place.
Because that bureaucratic environment, it, as you said, it could suit some people really well. I mean, this guy I'm referring to, he went on to work for like Google, Facebook, Twitter. He worked for like the top IT companies in the world, right? Who are headquartered here in Dublin. Because he's good at that. Whereas when I was in, you know, when he was in school, he was like popular boy. When I was in, I'm kind of odd. You know, like I'm a bit odd. People would refer to me like, oh, Kev, he's nice, bit odd, but nice. But in fact, and I think that's why, like, I mean, I've talked about this before, but when I was younger, I got into like the rave cultures that you would call it, and experiment with my consciousness. And I realized that I liked meeting people that could talk about things outside of the small talk, because life is too short for small talk. And I get that in a job it can be skillful, but I really do think that sometimes small talk is handy, isn't it? Because it's handy to have a bit of it, but it's good to get beyond that.
Definitely.
And actually, this is a nice little segue. And actually, that's why I like podcasting.
Yeah.
Naomi, because you're a podcaster too, aren't you?
All the introverts.
Should I that segue? It's a
Yeah.
good segue.
It's very impressive.
Thank you. So the heart of the matter
Yeah,
is still going.
it is. Yeah.
You do series. Why did you decide to do series?
So I decided to do a series because this was an adventure I wanted to take, and very like we're talking about, like I wanted to talk to people in kind of more deeper conversations, but I wanted to save myself the professional pressure of this now has to be something I schedule every week. And because it takes me a long time to learn, I wanted to do it slowly, and I'd record them and release 6, and then I'd record some and release another 6, and then that's what I'll do for the 3rd series. And it suits my dynamic a little bit better to be, I like thinking about it a lot, to kind of go, all right, I'm going to think about this while I'm doing those 6, and then I can take a little bit of time off and then do more. So yeah, that's the way I'm doing it.
Yeah, because I know Andrea Ferretti does that with Yoga Land. She does series as well.
Yeah.
And why did you? Because I think this is an interesting question. Why, if I do say so myself, why did you decide to start a podcast?
I'd wanted to do it for ages. Like kind of this idea, like a new creative challenge. Every so often I'll go, you know what, I'm not feeling challenged, and I like challenging myself to learn something new. So the whole kind of sort of draw to, like, I'd have to learn the whole computer side of things, like how to edit, how to like use the software, whatever, like all of that I wanted to challenge myself on. But also what I find super fascinating, I've just read another book on interviewing, like being able to ask questions to draw knowledge out of people that maybe they didn't even know was, you know, necessarily they had, or something they hadn't thought about it. I find that amazingly fascinating.
What's the book called?
That book I heard on another podcast is a book called We Need to Talk, and it's by a lady, Celeste Headley.
Okay.
So yeah, they can put that in your show notes.
Damn it, now I've got to do that. Google it yourselves.
And another thing I did as part of the prep for the podcast was I did a workshop. A friend of mine works for Athena Media in Dublin, and they run workshops on podcasting, and I did a workshop which was amazing as well, and just like loads of tips. And I think that, like that, when you're a teacher, you can talk a lot, and like, you know, we've already spoke about and you mentioned, I find it very fascinating to become the listener and to become a person who's now, you know, interacting in the conversation and learning, and, you know, more interactive than just speaking and someone else is receiving, that kind of thing. So yeah.
Who do you like? Interviewers, who do you like their style?
Good question. So where I actually heard that book recommended was The Knowledge Project, Shane Parrish. He's really good.
Shane
Parrish.
Okay.
Yeah, he's amazing interviewer.
Can you find his stuff on YouTube, like him interviewing people?
He's got his podcast, Knowledge Project, it's called.
Okay, so it's audio, it's not video.
Yeah, audio.
I do like watching people being interviewed though. Who do you, is there anyone you like to watch being interviewing other people?
I've watched, have you watched My Next Guest, David Letterman?
Yeah, I watched the one, I think, with Kanye West, maybe. Was he on it?
Yeah, that was a weird one. But yeah. I like David Letterman as an interviewer. I really enjoyed Melinda Gates. He interviewed, if you want to watch that one. So that's someone I've watched. Who else?
You like that one because he's a good interviewer?
Yeah. I also liked he interviews Ellen. That's the other one I enjoyed. I just enjoyed how he drew questions out of, or answers out of her with his questions. So yeah.
What do you think he does well then that makes him so good at interviewing?
What does he do so well? He pauses. He leaves a lot of space. Yes. And he's slow in how he asks the question. Like, he might say something in his experience and then he'll say, he'll sort of like that segue it into a question. It's interesting.
That's fascinating because I've watched him before, Dave Letterman, and what he'll do is the person will give a response, then he'll kind of look to the audience, he'll do a very subtle facial reaction or something and let it play out, let the audience maybe laugh a little bit or whatever it is. And sometimes there'll be moments where nothing is being said at all.
Yes.
Now it does make a difference if you have an audience because that fills in that.
Yeah.
But I've noticed Joe Rogan who will just have moments where he just stops and doesn't say anything at all. And in a way, I think that works okay for video. But for audio, that doesn't work as well because you can't see what's going on. But it's a...
And it's the personability. Like one thing, Neil and I, when we were watching another one with David Letterman was Lewis Hamilton, the Formula One driver. And he seemed very nervous being interviewed. And he's, again, probably more introverted character, just likes driving and kind of being competitive and performing. But at the end, David Letterman wanted to do the thing, where you shake up the champagne if you win, Formula One or whatever. And he wanted to do that and he was kind of joking around and you could see Lewis Hamilton was quite what's happening here? It's a bit awkward. But David Letterman put his arm around him and it was very subtle, but kind of included him and sort of just gave him that sense of, it's nearly over now. This is just for fun or whatever. And it was just a tiny thing, but it means that the person being interviewed doesn't feel like they're just being thrown under the gauntlet. I'm going to embarrass you now in front of an audience or something. So it's cool.
Little things like that. Yeah. I can go down rabbit holes on YouTube watching things like that. There's one channel called Charisma on Command.
Okay.
Have you heard of this?
No.
And it analyzes people being interviewed. You'd probably love it because you're watching an interview and someone analysing an interview.
Yeah, okay, cool.
And one of them is Will Smith on the Graham Norton show. And it's a little bit unfair really, but the guy analysing is comparing Will Smith to his son Jaden Smith. They're both on at the same time. And it's fascinating though to think of Will Smith because, he is massively successful in everything he does. And part of that is his human skills, his communication skills. The little things like... he won't let someone else talk over him. It sounds daft, but if he's speaking, he'll finish to the end until he makes the point. Another thing is if someone says something, if someone's talking, he'll actually turn his body fully to face them, not kind of just look over his shoulder. Loads of things. And when something funny happens, he has the biggest laugh and he claps and, to validate people. And I don't think that's contrived. I think he is that way.
Yeah.
But I do think that no matter what your communication skills are like, it is good to be aware of what you're doing. Little things like, like crossing your arms or I noticed this actually. We did the hike on the retreat and the guide that took us out there was very nice, very quirky. But one thing he did was he had his back to people quite a lot. So instead of getting everyone in a semicircle and saying, okay, this is the thing over here, he'd talk to a handful of people and have his back. He'd be standing in front of someone else with his back to them. And for me, that shows maybe he's been out in the woods a long time. But it shows, I think having that awareness will make everything in your life better.
And it relates, I think, a big part of that, again, is a sense of presence,
Yes.
So, if there is pause and you're present and you kind of say, oh, Kevin asked me a question there and you're kind of aware, whereas if you're distracted or you're nervous or you're thinking about something else, that is displayed in how you're behaving. So those little signs of you didn't even realize someone was behind you or, that kind of little thing. And you're maybe not doing it to be rude, but you literally just didn't realize or you didn't weren't cognizant of it at the time or something. Yeah.
But when you're doing audio only, when you're just speaking like this, then it's more so about, I think the pausing it is huge. I really do. Do you think that with the podcasting, you want to take it beyond because you've had kind of a diverse range of guests, but is there a certain type of person or topics that you find really interesting?
Yeah, also a good question. I really wanted to talk to, I suppose what I find very fascinating is the application of, and we hear this a lot, but like how we can think about teaching from someone who's a writer, how we can think about the environment from what we've learned in yoga, how we can think about communication from someone who's like into fitness, so like you can cross curricular all of those facets. And like, I think, say last week you were speaking to Jerry Duffy. What's, I think, amazing for yoga teachers to hear from him is the universal theme of like, speaking and engaging a group. Whereas if it had been me giving those tips, you might feel like, oh, I've heard all this before. It's about yoga teaching or whatever. Whereas when you hear diverse ranges of people, you can go, oh my God, that's like how I feel in yoga teaching. It kind of opens it up for you a tiny bit more. And like, say another Netflix thing that I love watching is Chef's Table. Did you ever watch that?
No, I've never seen it.
So it's cool. So it's about like each one, they're so well produced and like the visual is amazing, but each week will be another chef and their life and how they've ups and downs and what they've gone through, and then their, mentality and their mindset of being a top Michelin star chef in the world. But I love watching that because it's like inspiring. It's like how someone's achieved. Whereas I may not necessarily feel as drawn to watching a documentary on a yoga teacher because it's too close to home maybe for you to feel like inspired by, or
and as you said, it's the universal principles that can go across any discipline.
Exactly.
And I loved I hope to get Jerry on again because there was so much we didn't cover. But have you ever met him?
Actually went to a talk of his. It was called, it was a group of talks called Huddle. It was 3 years ago because I was organising an event of talks and I wanted to see another one just to see how it was done. And he was one of the speakers. So yeah, I've seen him speak and it was really good.
Because what's fascinating about him is that he used to be so scared of it. That was petrified. And you can tell that it's something he continues to work on. He's very aware of himself and how he comes across. And another thing I really loved about him is stories. He tells stories, and I think that art of telling stories is lost a little bit. Like if I go to my mum's from Wicklow and that's from Mayo, so if I go when I was a kid, I'd go to the countryside to see my granny and stuff, and I see all my cousins, and we used to sit around my uncle's. Typically my uncles would tell stories and we'd be sitting there for ages. Someone would tell a story. A story could last for 20 minutes. Then the next person tells a story and everyone's just listening to the story. But I actually think, and this is not a diss on social media, but our attention span is getting more fragmented and we're not as good at telling stories probably because we just don't do it as much. But yet, I think one of the best ways to convey a point or educate someone is through storytelling.
Oh, absolutely. I like some of the teachers I really admire are really good storytellers. I did a training a few years ago with Cindy Lee. She's a yoga teacher in America. But just so effective at bringing in like a really simple everyday life story. And you're like, yeah, that makes sense. I really find that quite inspiring. It's something I still have to work on because I'll sit down, to plan my lesson or whatever it is, a session, and I'll have so many thoughts that I'm like, okay, refine this into a story. Come on, Naomi, you can do it. Yeah. But yeah, it's something you do have to work on. So yeah.
Would Cindy be telling stories about herself?
It could be anything, but she's just that real gift of like, oh my God, wait till I tell you a story. And she'll just like, it could be, you know, anything. It could be about like macaroni and cheese. I think she told us a story about once. And it's just, it's brilliant, because what I think it opens up for people is that side of our brain that's like, okay, well, and then what happens? You know, and then suddenly you're not negative. Suddenly you're not in your own, you know, drone of record playing of, you know, I'm bored or whatever it is. So, you know, and I see it with my nephews. Like, as soon as you say, okay, story time, they're so excited. Like, you know, it's part of us, I think.
But I think that, and upon that, another skill is being able to make a point in the story. So telling a story is definitely one thing, but then if she can tell a story about macaroni and cheese, but relate it to yoga, to something.
Well, basically what
like
it was
analogy.
about was, I remember it was about how she'd had macaroni and cheese, and it's one of those evenings you sit down, watch TV, and you're like, this is comfortable. It's comfort food. And basically the point of the story was, your asana you don't necessarily want your asana to be comfort food. You like
Simple and
like you want maybe there to be some element of discomfort there, so you're challenging your muscles or whatever it is, not necessarily sitting down eating mac and cheese.
but but isn't that such a simple analogy to make? And it's one that as you said, there's a part of our brain that I think yearns for that most definitely. What's her name? Cindy Lee.
Yeah. She's really cool. Yeah.
Why did you decide to train with her?
Actually, another interesting question. I wanted to do a training. This was in 2014. And I was kind of like, oh, where do I want to train? And I'd already gone to India the year prior. And I was like, well, I go back to India. And there was another few courses I was looking at. And I listened to a podcast with Cindy. How did I come across it? I can't remember how I initially came across the interview with her, but I thought, I love the sound of her. And like, I just loved everything she was saying. And then I literally signed up for her.
For a podcast then?
Yeah.
She was a guest on the podcast?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. That shows you the power of podcast.
Oh,
then.
absolutely, yeah. And I just loved the sound of her voice, and I liked what, you know, the kind of points she was making. I just felt like I resonated with. And then I saw the dates of her training and I thought, I want to do this. And it was brilliant. I really enjoyed it. So, yeah.
It's funny how, like, when I did the retreat, one girl came over from Amsterdam because she listens to the podcast.
Yeah.
So I came over, I collected her, took her down to Wicklow. Me, her, and my girlfriend in the car. And we're talking away, and I'm realizing that what I'm saying, she's already heard me say it before. so it's like we've been it's almost like she's listened to loads of episodes, so I'm telling stories or saying things, I'm like, and she's like, yeah, you said that on your podcast. I'm like, damn it.
Nothing new.
Nothing new, exactly. Should we just play my podcast in the car?
So funny.
Exactly. But it is a powerful thing. I would say, bold statement, and I'd like to see what you think, that if anyone, not everyone should start a podcast, but it's definitely a valuable tool if you want to be a professional communicator.
Yeah. And even like, I don't know if you've done this with Rachel, but Neil and I recorded a few when I was practicing just to get used to it and asking questions whenever. Yeah. And I actually that was so enriching. Like looking at Neil like a person that I wasn't looking at the person I see every day, like asking questions and then being really interested in his answers. And it was so cool because afterwards I thought, wow, I actually super enjoyed hearing what he had to say to, it wasn't just to his wife. It was he was answering formal questions.
The dynamic is completely different. Actually, Tim Ferriss, if people don't know, Tim Ferriss is a huge podcaster, but he did a podcast with his mum and dad separately. Okay, yeah. And is never going to release them.
Okay, yeah. I was thinking, I've never heard those yet.
No, and I really like the idea of that, and I've thought about doing that too, and I think I will, because then you have a little piece of history.
Yeah.
And you could be like, say to your son or daughter, this is what your granddad sounded like. This is
Yeah.
and you'd always have that.
I always think, and again about stories, like I'd love to do that with my mom, like ask her stories about her childhood or, you know, about grandma or something, and be kind of, okay, this is a set time, you're going to tell me these stories, because they'll be lost if, you know, if we don't talk about it like that. So it's a cool idea.
Yeah, because my this weekend I went around seeing my mum and dad, and the TV wasn't on, because normally the TV's always on in the house, but it just wasn't on. And my dad was holding court, just telling us these stories, and he's like, I've known this man all my life, obviously, because he's my dad, and I've never heard these stories before. And it was but it's so hard to find time in life where you just sit and talk to people. Yeah. That's the beauty of a podcast, because we're sitting across from each other talking now with no distractions. Whereas even if it's anything, a phone, someone coming into the room, you don't get that. So I tell you what, I'm saying it now, this is evidence. I will, before Christmas, do a podcast with my mum and my dad separately.
Okay, I'll do it with my mum, and we can text each other.
And I might release it just for a laugh. Well, Naomi, I could talk to you for ages.
I know. I feel like I want.
What are you gonna say?
I want to like keep talking.
Is there what's next for you?
What is next? So I only got home last week from the summer break, so I'm kind of getting back into my routine and the schedule. What is next in terms of work is just routine, getting back into things, and then podcast series 3 hopefully coming up soon, and that's kind of it.
What about and the teacher training?
Next year. So in the spring.
In the spring. And is that over? Is it intensive?
All to be decided, but some sort of format, like maybe like a 10 days, then a break, a 9 days break, and another chunk. That's how we did it this year, and it worked well. So yeah. And
if people want to find out more about you, where do they go?
So I'm Naomi.Sturdy on Instagram, and then everything else, Facebook, my website, all that is Elements Yoga. So
Elements Yoga. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Naomi.
Yeah, thanks very much, Kevin.
Thanks so much for listening. Again, October 5th, Saturday evening at 7:30 p.m. If you're free, you'd like something fun to do, come and join me and Patrick Beach and a host of other yogis for a live podcast. €10 for a ticket. Feel free to bring a friend. And in December, on the 14th, on another Saturday, if you'd like to come to Sligo to learn how to handstand, I'm doing a workshop. You can find all information on my website, kevinboreyoga.ie/events and retreats, or go to their website, saltandsoul.ie, and book your spot for 30 bob. This podcast is brought to you by Small Changes, organic, eco-friendly, whole food store based here in Dublin. They look after the environment. They produce really good products as well with a zero waste ethos. So check them out. If you enjoyed this episode, you found it helpful, please share with your friends on your IG stories and leave a review on iTunes. Thanks as always for listening. Hope to speak to you. Well, I'll definitely speak to you next week. See ya.